This is your tech news briefing for Thursday, November 17th. I'm Zoe Thomas for The Wall Street Journal. In September, Russian President Vladimir Putin ordered a mass mobilization of men to support the country's war in Ukraine. That order spurred many men of fighting age, including from its tech sector, to leave the country. It's actually the second recent exodus of tech workers from Russia. A lot of them left last winter when the invasion was announced. But this is believed to be a far bigger wave of departures, as those who couldn't leave last time now look for an exit. So what does this mean for Russia's struggling economy? And what happens next for these highly skilled workers? Joining us to discuss all of this is our reporter, Yuliya Chernova. Hi, Yuliya. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
Yuliya, some estimates show as many as 1 million people left Russia this spring. That includes software developers and other tech workers that can do their jobs remotely. So where are they going?
The biggest beneficiary is probably Georgia, and then other countries that offer an easier transition, whether they have a visa-free entry or an easy way of obtaining a visa. So Kazakhstan is a big beneficiary. Then you have in Europe, Serbia is another destination that's pretty large. There's interesting research by a professor at the Vienna University of Economics and Business who looked at GitHub accounts of Russian developers. GitHub is a software platform where developers collaborate. And he geolocated the accounts of Russian developers to see whether they are listing a new location for themselves. So what he found was that as of November 8th, about 13% of Russian developers now list a different country than they did at the start of this year. And another 13% just obscured their location. And he estimates that about 20% of Russian developers have left the country this year. And the biggest destination, according to his research, is Georgia.
And how easy is it for these tech workers to find a new job, or are they keeping the positions that they had when they were still in Russia?
A lot of them actually are keeping their jobs. Some of the Russian companies did adjust their own policies to allow their workers to continue remotely. At the same time, a lot of the people I spoke with are trying to find other jobs, and it's not that easy to get paid abroad. You know, they're getting paid in rubles in Russia, and transferring that money out isn't simple, especially with all kinds of sanctions and problems with the monetary transactions cross-border right now with Russia. And in general, there's a lot of uncertainty in the Russian economy. There are reasons not to be tied closely to these Russian companies. So these workers are looking as best they can.
What does that mean for the, startups or Russian tech companies that have hired these workers? How easy is it for the companies to survive once their employees are leaving the country?
There was a big dislocation and panic and pause in just work itself by many tech teams in Russia right around the time when mobilization was announced. Some say that by now things have settled down and people are adjusting. And having workers abroad is somewhat manageable for these companies, but it also depends on what kind of work and what kind of projects they are performing. If they're working for the government, let's say, it's harder to justify having data transferred across borders, let's say.
Are any of these companies having to consider shutting down or moving their operations entirely out of Russia?
Yes, we certainly saw a lot of companies move their own operations abroad. I spoke with one company, for example, InDrive. It's a ride-sharing startup that was founded in Siberia, in Russia. Currently, it's based in Silicon Valley. It's backed by American investors, and most of their workers were based in Russia. They had more than 1,000 at the beginning of this year. And they are relocating everybody out of the country. This company in particular has a lot of people moving to Kazakhstan and Cyprus. Whoever is not leaving, the CEO said, will be laid off.
Can you give us a sense of how important the tech sector is to Russia's economy, and I guess how that has changed since the start of the war and since this new exodus of tech workers?
The tech sector is certainly important for the Russian economy. It's estimated between 3 and 6% of the country's GDP. It was one of the faster growing sectors of the economy, and it was also a sector that helped the economy diversify. The Russian economy is very much dependent on oil and gas revenue, and the tech sector was also important in supplying a lot of well-paid jobs. So certainly their departure from the country is a hit to the consumer market. And in general, it's also a tax hit. The income taxes that these folks were paying to the treasury are likely not going to be paid in Russia. And also, tech is important to the government. It supports other sectors and the development of other sectors. And it's also important just for the defense industry, for cybersecurity.
So then what does this kind of brain drain mean long-term for Russia and its ambitions within tech?
You have hundreds of thousands of smart, educated, motivated, well-off people leaving the country. It's a loss for Russia and a gain for wherever they end up. At the same time, it's not to say that everything stopped and all the tech companies closed. In Russia, there is still growth there, and some companies are doing okay, and some of these companies are doing even better than they thought they would be back in the spring. So it remains to be seen what happens. But the general uncertainty is a big problem for the tech sector because founders are scared to invest further.
All right, that's our reporter, Yuliya Chernova. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And that's it for today's Tech News Briefing. If you want more tech stories, check out our website, WSJ.com. I'm Zoe Thomas for The Wall Street Journal. Thanks for listening.